This is Enabling Media, enabling content through new media.
Hi, my name is Ray Cabe, and I'm the head of operations here in GSI. I've been working with Guild for 4 years now, started 2017. So as an operations lead, I ensure that day-to-day operations run smoothly for both staff and onshore managers. Usually, I have a brief catch-up with team members on how they are and how are they coping up with the current situation. And also, I'm doing some administrative functions to support the teams here in Manila. The teams that are reporting to myself is the quality team. I'm also indirectly managing claims and admin operations team, and with Guild Link some of the administrative functions. I had worked with different companies now, and I can say that Guild is the most humane company that I've ever been with. We see people as the treasure of the company and even extending great efforts to support people's welfare. Change is very constant, and we need to adapt to whatever is present. As I know that every staff is unique and has unique personality. When you have a bunch of these unique persons in your group, one leadership style wouldn't work out. So it's a combination of different styles that I learned from during the past few years. True introspection might be a bit hard, as it requires an acknowledgement of your own flaws and weaknesses. But through this, you'll know where and how to direct your energies. And as you know yourself better, you will have a clear idea of what is right or wrong. And because leaders will be seen as people of influence, whether it be on actions or words. Once they see a positive influence on you, then you're on the great start of being a leader.
Good day. Amidst the imposed community quarantine, our offshore operations team continued to deliver 98% capacity last week, while working from home across different locations in and out of the city. With zero client-related outages and minimal system issues, we remain stable and continue to provide excellent throughput. Also, as our admin operations team and their operations manager, Sarah Evans' recommendations from our leadership onshore throughout the month, they were announced as one of the August 2020 Nearly Awards winners. A well-deserved recognition. Congratulations, team! To end the week on a high note, GSI also conducted a financial wellness seminar for its employees last 4th of September. Hosted by Ms. Eunice Garcia Alvarez and Ms. Anne-Margaret Malyari, certified investment advisors of PruLife UK, they taught us how to be financially smart, which is relevant to today's challenges. Expanding GSI social media platforms, we're happy to announce that all of our videos will now be housed in our new YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe and discover our team's talents and skills. Moreover, we're still looking for a new media specialist and a senior portfolio analyst. If you're interested, please visit our LinkedIn page for more information. We will also announce vacancies for other exciting roles in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. And that's it for this edition of Weekly Wrap. For more information about Guild Solutions Inc., please visit our website at guildsolutionsinc.com.au. For more news and content, please like and follow our official page in Facebook. You may also follow us on LinkedIn for more job opportunities and news about the company. For this week's wrap, my name is Chino. Thank you for watching and have a great week ahead.
This edition of Thought Leaders is made possible by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media.
Good morning. My name is Jel Nolasco, and you're watching Thought Leaders with Elisabet Wreme. Today's show will be moderated by our President and CEO, Ian Moses. Thought Leaders is brought to you by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media. For our viewers here at home, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. If you require a free certificate, just go to bit.ly/GSI request 1. This link, however, will only be active at the latter part of the show until 12 p.m. local time. So stay tuned as we'll let you know once this form is active. For our viewers in North America, good evening. To our viewers in Australia and New Zealand, good afternoon. You're watching us live in Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, which to date has around 10,000 followers and subscribers. Thanks to all of you. Now let's take a quick peek at social media and say hi to people over here. Hello, Brendan, who's saying good morning. Hello, good morning. And Avin saying good morning as well. Pancho is saying hello. One of our staff, hello Pancho, how are you? Tuning in from Silang, Cavite. I also saw a few staff like JC, who's helping us moderate social media. Catherine is saying hi all the way from Zamboanga City. How are you, Catherine? Ruth is saying hi to everyone, and she's logging in from Uban, Quezon, all the way from Quezon. Hi, how are you? Jessica is saying hi from Pangasinan State University, Lingayen. We're all over the Philippines, all over the world. Viewers are coming in. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mary Ann, coming in also from Finme University of Pangasinan. Good morning to all of you. To date, we have about close to 150 viewers. Thank you very much across 3 platforms. So that's it for now. If you have comments or questions, just type them in the comment section. And our social media moderators, Kim, Micah, Malin, Pancha, and JC, will be with you throughout the show. Our director and executive producer, Sam Sotare, is also helping us navigate today's show. Later, we'll also be asking your questions directly to Elisabet and Ian if we still have time left. Friends, we're now transitioning to the main show. You're watching Thought Leaders with our COO, Elisabet Wreme.
This is Enabling Media, enabling content through new media.
We all know what community is, but what does community feel like? It's the feeling you get watching the magpie family in your front yard patiently wait for you to bring them a snack. It's the feeling you get watching the kangaroos huddle together under the tree in your backyard. And it's the feeling you get seeing the flock of galahs play in the gum tree on your morning drive to work. But community is much more than a feeling. It's the way us Australians work together through thick and thin. Being a community means being Australian. At Guild, we're here for some of your toughest days. We're here through the fires and then through the floods. We're here through the break-ins, the accidents and the mishaps. We're more than just an insurance company. We're the people you call when it's all gone wrong. You're part of our community, our family, and we look forward to protecting you, not only now, but into the future. Guild Insurance, where community is what matters most.
Hands up if you want to retire richer. You go shopping, don't you? You like to save money? Super! That's exactly what Super is. Shopping plus savings equals super. At Super, you get rewarded straight into your superannuation account. So instead of getting all these random points that you're probably never going to use, at Super, when you shop, you get money rewards that go straight into your superannuation account. For example, if you spend $100 at the grocery store, an additional $5 will be added to your superannuation account without you having to spend anything extra than that original $100. It sounds too good to be true, but it's not. Over time, your super balance grows every time you shop. Here's how it works. 1, sign up at our website. 2, select the vouchers that you want to purchase or the retailers that you want to shop with online. 3, pay using money that you've transferred into your My Cash account in Super by credit or by debit card. 4, go shopping. 5, watch your Super rewards grow in your Super account. Shop and save more to your super every day with Super.
Shop it up and top it up. Shop, save, super. Shop it up and top it up. Shop, save, super.
Hi, I'm Ian. Welcome to Guild Solutions. Guild Solutions is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Guild Group of companies based in Australia. Guild Solutions itself is headquartered in Manila and offers bespoke solutions for companies that require unique or have challenging business needs. How do we do this? Simple. We hire the best people, we foster the best culture, and we give those people a new and interesting challenge every day to allow them to grow and develop and move on to bigger and better things. And for our clients, what this means, we don't see problems, we only see solutions. We think differently and we're proactive, and most importantly, we make things happen. And all the while we do this while having lots of fun. So that's a really quick snapshot of Guild Solutions. It's been great meeting you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
This edition of Thought Leaders is made possible by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Moses. I'm the President and CEO of Guild Solutions Inc. And it's a really nice moment to be with all of you today. I've really been enjoying the content which has been coming through in the last few episodes from a number of our key staff across the Guild Group. And today is no different, actually. We've got a very special guest who I'll introduce in a moment. Before I do, I just wanted to again extend my hello to everyone who's been watching, particularly in the Philippines. I wanted to just say, I just wanted to wish everyone the best through what continues to be a pretty difficult time, obviously across the world, but in the Philippines, with the pandemic. I do wish you the best. Everyone from the Guild Group does, and Guild Solutions. And we hope that things return to some sort of normal in the very near future. With that, I would like to get on to the star of the show today. I'm really pleased to be introducing our Chief Operating Officer for the Guild Group, Elisabet Wreme. Elisabet will come and provide some of her experience and thoughts for the next 45 minutes or so, and we'll get to ask her some questions. I've been really privileged to work with Elisabet for the last couple of years. We've worked on some diverse projects actually, and I've really been. It's been a privilege to really get to know Elisabet and get her insights based on her experience from across a number of businesses. Elisabet is an innovator. She's also has a degree in engineering, which I'm personally very happy about because I have a similar background, and it's something that we haven't actually spoken about, but I might ask her a bit more about that during this show. So without further ado, I think we'll bring on Elisabet and say hello.
Nice intro. And thank you for that nice introduction. And before I get into what I wanted to talk about, I just want to reinforce what Ian said. A big thank you to everyone in the Philippines. We know you're doing a tough, but you're doing an amazing job. So we do really appreciate it, and we think about you a lot. So let's get on with my discussion. So I'm really excited to be here, and perhaps you wonder why I want to talk about this as a topic. To me, it's such an important topic to drive more inclusion across the world. And I'm hoping by sharing my story and my insights that you will get some hint and tips for perhaps how you can drive some of that change in your part of the world as well. I will start to talk a little bit about myself and then mix in some research and hopefully then take it to some pieces of advice and insights before opening it up to questions. So by all accounts, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of this amazing organization, I'm a very successful leader. With that, people sometimes say to me, I mean, you're a proof point that you don't really need to have these discussions anymore because, I mean, I have a doctorate in business administration. I have a patent to my name. I'm a chair of Breast Screen Victoria and a director of YMCA Victoria. So clearly I've been able to be successful. But I don't believe that's the case. Yes, have I been successful? Yes. But does that mean that there is not a lot of bias and things that we need to do to change? Because if I reflect on my life, I think that I had so many privileges that other people don't have. And what I mean with a privilege is things like race, socioeconomic background, gender, all of those things are privileges. Privileges, though, and they help you. The problem with privileges is if you have them, you don't even know that they exist and that you don't actually see how much benefits they give you. So you count them as your own success. So if you take me, for example, I was growing up in Sweden. That's where my accent comes from. In a upper middle class family. Sweden at that time had fantastic school systems. I had parents who wanted me to be whatever I wanted to be. And at the time, Sweden was very much focused on equality. So in my world, everything kind of aligned. The only privilege I haven't had is being a male. So I have no idea where I would have been if I had that privilege. Have I worked hard? Of course I worked hard. I'd take some brave decisions and so forth. So it's not luck that I'm here, but I also acknowledge that I've had heaps of help along the way. The sad thing is that if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have seen it like that because I was one of those people who couldn't see the difference between my own achievements and the privileges I had along the way. And something happened that made me change my mind. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that event. This is about 8 years ago. I was working in one of Australia's big 4 banks. And I was lucky enough to be nominated to go on a course that ran over a year. And it was really a course to get you ready to become a senior executive. One of the events for this course was that you went to Alice Springs, and since we have so many international people on this call, it's the Red Centre of Australia, and we were sent there and which was an amazing opportunity we slept under the stars, we spent time in Aboriginal communities. It was really, the course really tried to push your boundaries and your comfort zone and learn to live in a much more ambiguous environment. That was the purpose of it. But I'm sidetracking. As part of that story, though, we did a leadership challenge. And at the end of that week, there was a debrief. So I'll just paint this scene for you. There was lots of butcher's paper and a timeline. And one of the facilitators asked the question for how leadership has changed the events of that week. So it went a little bit like this. Marcus did this, so the group took this way. Then Patrick said something which took us into a little bit different perspective. Something then changed, so we actually then went down this path before Andrew came in, and we went here, and then we went up here again. So we plotted a whole week, so this was a long timeline. At the end of that, the facilitator just stood there quiet, and then he turned to us and said, were there no women? And on this course, there were 25 people, 13 men and 12 women. And we were all selected because we were kind of agile leaders with modern value systems. And still, this was the result that came out. And the group was in shock. So a couple of very interesting reflections came out. One was all the women took it personally, and that includes myself. So when you go through it, you remember yourself, what you kind of did. And you sit there and think, oh, they don't recognize that I did it, or they didn't remember it, because the events were on the board. So all of those someone or something happened were up there. They were all women's interventions. All the intervention by males were named. The intervention by women was nearly always remembered, but not attributed. So that was just like a light bulb in my head. And the other one was in regards to that we all did it. It wasn't a male problem. This is a problem that we all have. Because if half of us were female in the room, why didn't we say Mary did that, Sarah did that, for instance? We all did it. So when I'm talking about finding our own voice, and it is about actually starting to recognize some of those unconscious biases we actually do have, because it's not until you make them conscious that you can start changing them. And there's lots of research to prove this point. Take software development, for instance, since Ian talked about before engineering. You would think that something like software development would be very objective, and it shouldn't really matter if you're male or female. But that's not the case. If you take open source software, so it's software that basically is developed by a community. And there is a gatekeeper that if you want to submit software into this space, it gets evaluated and either rejected or accepted. Studies has found that if you are a new member or a new contributor to this, and you happen to be identified as a female, your rejection rates are higher than if you're a male. And some of you may see that, oh, that's because I can't code. That's not right at all, because it turns out after they get accepted and they get known, the females actually have a much higher acceptance rate. So it's not the quality of the code, but there is an initial unconscious bias that, oh, this person can't be any good. Lucky in a field like software development, which is quite objective in the end, you can get over that and the playing field equals out. Many of you would have heard all of the research studies that's been done on CVs, for instance. They have created fake CVs, so it's exactly the same CV. You put a male name on one and a female name on another one, and then they send these two panels for rating for which one would you actually hire. And if you have a very ambitious CV, they always get picked with a male name. But sometimes with a female name, people will say, no, she's probably too hard work. She seems a bit bossy. I don't think she'd go well with the team. So again, that type of testing has proven that we have different views in our head for what a female and a male should be. Let's move towards something that we perhaps can do something about more. So, Sam, would you be able to show the presentation now? We're still on talking about research, but this is research being done on live data. So this is other form of recruitment biases to see how does word impact how people select candidates, and also are there any differences in how people describe males and females? And it turns out that there are. If we start with recommendation letters, see if I can get the slide to change. Oops, I went one step too far. I need to go back one. When people write a recommendation letter for a man, they write quite long letters. When they write them for female, they write much shorter letters. So when then they get evaluated, clearly there wasn't that much to say about the woman, there was more to say about the male, so clearly the male must be better. But it's also the way they get described that's interesting. In recommendation letters for male candidates, there is nearly always these type of words. Oh, he's superb, he's outstanding, he's exceptional. In women's letter, they talk much about, oh, she is so nice. They use communal words. She is kind. She's helpful. There's very seldom those strong standout words. And the other curious thing is that they often have doubt raises in them. Remember, these are recommendation letters. What doubt raises are classified are things like, instead of saying he's superb, you would say something, she's not the best, but she's really good. And it's things like adding things like, oh, she needs minimal supervision. You wouldn't even say that about a man. Why do you need to say it about a woman? So we kind of add those extra security things to cover ourselves when we recommend women. So what's sitting behind all of that? So if you get one recommendation letter that's longer, more information, and you stronger word, of course you're going to choose that candidate. The interesting thing for me, though, is not that statistics. It's more the same insights that came from our session up in Alice Springs. And that is that it is not a female or male thing. We all do it. So these gatekeepers who use these descriptions are not just men. We are as bad as the guys to do it. To me, that's an upside because that means we have some control and we can start changing it. The study goes further and reveals that unfortunately, we also describe ourselves using those words. So in our own CVs, we would use more communal words and we will use less strong language. So what can we do about it? Well, there's quite a lot of things you can do. The first thing is to actually recognize that you are doing it. So keep checking yourself because it's not until you recognize you're doing it that you can change it. And if you're a female in this room, or on this call, I should say, go home and check. If you have a CV, go home and check it. And if you are going into interview in the next not too distant future, think about how you're going to present yourself and how you're going to talk about yourself. And if you're a manager and you are writing a recommendation letter or anything like that, think about, are you doing this person a disservice the way you describe them? And of course, if you sit like in a talent discussion, this is where you see some of these things. Make sure that you describe people on equal terms. So there's a lot of things we can do if we become conscious how we ought to change the way we talk about people. Because what this research basically says is that words do matter because they have such an impact on employment outcome. So it is really is time to stop women just being nice, and absolutely the right time to stop describing them as such, because it's much more about what they do than using all of these communal words that we're talking to them about. Sam, if you can take down the presentation. So if we bring all of this together, we have what I would say a systemic problem. We have at one hand unconscious bias for what a woman can and can't do, like the software engineering. Well, that clearly shouldn't be as good on technical roles. So we've been ingrained to think that. At one hand, we have that we describe women and men differently and using two soft words for when we're describing women. And if you couple that with, I know I'm going to generalize here, so forgive me for doing that, is that most of the time a woman needs to feel quite comfortable for taking the next steps. Like if you read a job description, you need to think that, oh, I can do 9 or 10 out of the 10 items, so yeah, I can apply for that job. Men generically feel, oh, I can do 4 or 5, I can learn the rest as time goes by. So you have a natural tendency for women not to progress as fast because they don't go as fast in their career aspirations through needing to feel in control with all the systemic biases. And when you combine those two, we shouldn't be surprised that the world hasn't shifted that much. So what can we do about it? Well, one thing, of course, is formal programs, changes to how, let's say what we're doing in Guild, we're women in Guild, and having these type of conversations that we have today, all the way to some areas like coming from Sweden, they used to have quotas, and all of those things drove heaps of change in politics and so forth. So there's a lot of things systemically we can do. I don't want to talk too much about that because you don't have control over that. The only thing you can control is yourself. I'm a great believer in that the only person's behavior that you have power over is your own. So use it. So you can actually drive change. Before I get too far down what you can do, I want to describe one more thing that I have seen in my life that when I started looking about how women get described in businesses has driven me nuts, and I'm trying to fight. So I want to share that with you. And that is that so often we end up talking for women. And what I mean with that is, I'll give you like an example. Let's say we're sitting there and there is some extra project work coming up and we need someone to step in and do that piece of work. You talk about people's skills or who can do it. And often you will be like, yeah, but she just came back from maternity leave. Or, I mean, you remember she has 2 kids. We probably can't ask her to do it. I have never, hand on my heart, in my whole life, heard that discussion for a male, ever. So women gets basically cut off so many of these growth opportunities because we are looking after them. So I'm basically allergic to this type of conversation. So anytime I hear it, I always said, I don't think we have the right to make that choice for that person. We should ask her if she's the best person for the role. Let's ask her, but make it absolutely clear that we understand if she wouldn't want to do it. That's how a manager you can handle it. For you, so if you're a manager, that's what I want you to do. Listen for it and step into it. If you are an individual, so if you're putting your individual hat on, your job is to make sure that your manager and other people around you knows what you want. Because if you are much clearer in saying what you're up for, it becomes much harder for you to fall into that category that where they're trying to look after you and actually do the wrong thing by you. So if you are not crystal clear as a female for what you are prepared to do and stretch, you probably are missing out on opportunities. I know it's not fair that the difference is there, but the difference is there. So when you know it, you have to compensate for it. And it's in your control to do it. So go home and think about what you could be up for and go back. And in a couple of days' time or weeks, make sure your manager understands that. That's my first piece of advice. The other thing I want to talk about is resilience, because it can be, when you start seeing these things, it can be too overwhelming. It's too hard. It's not fair. And that becomes a very hard position to be in. If I reflect on my own journey, I was very naive from the beginning, partly because of my upbringing and the time I was brought up in Sweden and what I saw. that I've thought the world was equal. So when I ran into situation where that wasn't the case, I always saw it as their problem. I saw them basically as dinosaurs, and I just wasn't with it yet. So that, in my world, that kind of really pathetic. And I was right, and they were just wrong. And it was my job to prove it, and I got a kick out of proving it. With that, I'm not saying it's right that it's like that. I just want to highlight that again. It's absolutely wrong that the world is tilted as it is. But what I'm trying to convey with that is that it is not you, it is the world around you, but I believe is wrong. You have the rights to expect equality. But keep that in mind, that it is you and you have the right, because as soon as you start to feel it's unfair, you end up feeling like a victim. And as soon as you do that, you get angry or you get anxious, and all of that saps energy out of you. So, what I want you to take from this conversation is that you have the right to find your voice, and your voice matters as much as everyone else's, even if it sometimes doesn't feel that's the case. That is not you doing the wrong thing. It had nothing to do with my accent or the way I engaged in that leadership challenge. It was systemic bias. So don't take it personally. Don't let it drain you. It is the environment you're in. Accept that's the case, but keep going and keep looking for those unconscious bias. Call it out. Talk about, because every time it becomes conscious, you can actually do a choice to say, do I accept it or don't I accept it? And then the world will move a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And we're quite a few people on this call. If all of us would just move the world a little bit every day, the power of that contribution from all of us will over time make a huge difference. And yes, do we need all of those other programs, quotas, all of those things happening as well? I do believe in those things. But I said, you don't have a power of those. Your power is to believe in your rights, believe that you have right to equality, and start changing the unconscious bias. So that's my ask of you. Keep going. Look for any improvements. Take that as energy and fuel for going forward. And if we all do that, the world will become a much better place. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Elisabet. As always, very salient points and thought-provoking and straight to the point, which is always appreciated. I do have a couple of questions if you're up for it. And actually, you did cover quite a few of the thoughts that I had going in. You did mention that that there is this struggle, and research still shows women are expected to do more at home. Now, whether that's, we can argue about how that changes over time, but also increasingly women are taking more of an active role in the workforce. So there's this competing priority or set of circumstances. For those who are listening here, who are perhaps leaders in companies or have positions of responsibility, you already talked about how we need to listen to the voice of the person. Is there anything else that you think we can be doing to help, I guess, try and balance up those two competing needs? And this is not only, I think, for women. I think it's predominantly for women, but I think increasingly for men as well.
Yeah, there is heaps. Sometimes it's very small things. For instance, example from my personal life, I once worked in a company that loved breakfast meetings. And I'm married to a Swede, and so I'm lucky that I have a husband that is expected to half of the housework. So I'm privileged in that way as well. But we don't have, since we moved to this country, we don't have any grandparents or anyone else to help us out. So we always shared, like for daycare, that I always used to drop off in the mornings, and he used to pick up because I could never get out on time, and he started really early, so that worked for us. So that's the backstory. But this company always wanted to do morning meetings. So if you always do drop-offs for your kids, suddenly I could never participate in those things. So it wasn't designed to keep me out of it, but by default, that was the go-to option for anything. Anytime something important came up that didn't fit in, it became a breakfast meeting. So basically, I was engineered out of being at those important meetings. So I know that's a small thing, but sometimes those things creates impacts on people at work. So we can clearly help people with that. And then it's really then flexible working. But I think though we've come such a long way. If COVID has done one thing, is that flexible working has become, and the technology that comes with that has changed. So I'm hoping that when things normalize a little bit more, but we have the technology, that some of the barriers that used to be there to be able to balance home life and work life will be easier to get around them, because we actually know what work is, and when work is carried out is changing. So exactly what that's going to be, I don't know, but I think that's very, very exciting, because before it was too hard because work was so rigid around these items that it became nearly impossible to deal with.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Certainly, the world has changed on flexible work, and very much now about outcomes rather than a particular time of day, etc. So I think everyone on the line is probably, particularly in the Philippines, many working from home still, or majority. So yeah, that would hit home.
The other thing, and I know this is going to sound odd, but to many people, but I think it's important when you're young, or when you get together earlier with your partner, to make sure that your value system aligns in these things, so you don't actually find out that you have two very different views of how you thought these things would happen. I know perhaps it's weird to have those conversations up front, but I had those conversations with my husband before we had kids. To basically establish the ground rules, because after having kids is one of the things, it's the only thing in life you can't change. Everything else you can change. Well, you can buy a different house, you can divorce your husband, but your kids are your kids no matter what. So
yeah,
I think it's important to actually understand how you're going to do it, because after it happens, life is such a mess for a while with kids. It's hard to sort those rules at that point in time. It's like when you run projects, you always decide the go or no go decisions well before you get there, because it's too late to have the criteria at that point in time. You're too emotional. Do it up front.
Yeah. So this is a good stream of thought. We're happy to leave your details if you want to continue to provide relationship advice to anyone else on the call.
Yeah, but if you don't have your home life, sort of becomes hard with work life, because I mean, especially in today's world, there is no boundaries anymore. So how do you manage that is critical.
Yeah, I agree. I wish I'd heard that advice many years ago, Elisabet. I guess remaining, we've got a few more minutes, just in terms of practical things that some of our audience can take away. We often find, and I think for particularly some of our younger staff members, they might get into situations where they feel a little bit uncomfortable speaking up. And I think, if anything, this is probably exaggerated for some of the younger female staff. Would you have any advice for those people who are sitting in a room, and perhaps they're, like you say, your example of perhaps dominant voices, for speaking up, and I guess being able to voice your opinion in a sensible way?
It depends on, I mean, it's a hard thing, because it depends on why it's hard to speak in the room. What I've seen with a lot of young females that are mentored, that they feel it's hard to actually create a break in the room and insert their voice, because that takes practice. One way I've got people to start practicing is to, if they have a relationship with someone in the room who has no problem creating space in that discussion, is to actually outside discuss that situation with them and say, I want to start contributing, but I don't really feel when I can do it or how I can do it. Because if you can get someone like that to help you to say, oh, Elisabet, what's your opinion on this? Or Elisabet, I think you should talk about this, because then they can get you in. And after you've done it a couple of times, a couple of things happens. One is you get more comfortable yourself doing it. And the second thing that happens, humans are such creatures of habits, is that the room expects you. Because if you've been in that room for such a long time without talking, They don't expect you to talk. So you actually have to change the dynamic, because if you go in and you look in any meeting, it's nearly always the same pattern for who talks. If Peter says something, then Adam says something, then Marcus wants to describe before. So it's the same dance basically all the time. If you want to have fun, you can draw down the names and you can just draw little lines between who talks, so you see the pattern, right? So if you don't know how to break that, get someone to help you break it. And you can start training that way. And then you learn over time to do it yourself.
Yeah, great advice. And I would ask anyone listening who perhaps falls into this bucket, who has experienced this, to take an action, to go and think about who you can get to help you in those situations. Because I think the only way someone can understand your true potential and know what you're thinking is for you to be able to say it. So great advice.
And then the other advice for anyone else who doesn't have any problems talking, think about who is quiet and think about how can I help them actually contribute, especially if you know that they know lots of stuff. Go home and think about at least one of those people, and then during the next week, get them to talk. Perfect.
Listening is one of those skills I think many people struggle with, including myself, and I have to practice. So I think we're coming up to time. My last question, Elisabet, and again, thank you so much for your time today. What would you do differently if you could do it all again? Is there anything that you would do differently?
Oh, there's heaps of things I would do differently. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? The one thing I wish I knew is probably a better question for me, and that is not to take things personally. Because up till 8 years ago, I always assumed all of these kind of unconscious bias was my problem and I needed to change. And it has been quite liberating realizing, well, it's not that I'm not good at doing certain things or doing those things. You're kind of up against it, and that has been a huge relief for me. So I wish someone would have told me that early on, because as soon as you have negative thoughts, that drains you of energy and it drains you of taking further steps forward. So I wish someone would have put me aside and said, you're going to experience this. It's their problem, not yours. But it's still going to happen. So just keep going, but don't take it to heart. Never feel like you're the victim, because as soon as you do, you lose your power.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much again. I walk away from every conversation we have having learnt something, so I really appreciate it. And on behalf of the many hundreds that are listening and have listened, thank you for your time and your insights. And I wish you a good weekend.
Thank you, and all the best to everyone. See ya.
Elisabet. Will we...
This edition of Thought Leaders is made possible by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media. We'll be right back. This is Enabling Media, enabling content through new media. Ang sakit na COVID-19 ay sanhi ng virus na SARS-CoV-2. Ang mga virus, di tulad ng mga bakterya, ay hindi buhay at kumakalat lamang sa pamamagitan ng pagpasok sa isang host. Sa pagkakataong ito, tayong mga tao. Ang virus na SARS-CoV-2 ay kabilang sa pamilya ng mga virus na nagdudulot ng simpleng sipon hanggang sa mga malalalang sakit na tulad ng COVID-19. Kumakalat ito sa pamamagitan ng droplets o mga maliliit na liquid na lumalabas sa ating katawan na naipapasa naman sa ibang tao. Maaari natin itong mahawakan at maipasok sa ating mga katawan sa pamamagitan ng ating mga mata o bibig. Pinagsusuot tayo ng face mask at face shield upang maiwasang maipasa ang mga droplets na ito sa ibang tao. Malaki ang maitutulong ng pagsuot ng mga mask at face shield upang mapabagal ang pagkalat ng COVID-19. Maraming lumalabas na mga komento sa social media na gawa-gawa lamang ang sakit na ito. Mayroon din namang mga nagsasabing nahatsing lamang ay COVID-19 na agad. Ang mga ito ay mga maling impormasyon. Hindi totoo ang mga ito. Dumadaan sa maigting na proseso ang pag-alam kung may COVID-19 ang isang tao. Maraming nagkakaroon ng COVID-19 na asymptomatic o walang nararamdamang sintomas. Mayroon ding mga nakakaranas ng kaunting sintomas. Mayroon ding mga nagkakaroon ng malubhang karamdaman. Ang ilan naman ay hindi pinapalad at nasasawi, lalo na ang mga may komplikasyon sa ibang karamdamang nakapagpapalala ng sakit o tinatawag na comorbidity.
Huwag po tayong sumali sa mga taong nagpapakalat ng maling impormasyon o ginagawang katatawanan ng sakit na COVID-19. Bilang pakikiisa at pagdamay sa libu-libong nawalan ng ama, ina, asawa, kapatid, at mga kaibigan sa buong mundo, kailangan po nating seryosohin ang laban sa sakit na ito. Para sa iba pang impormasyon tungkol sa COVID-19 at sa coronavirus na SARS-CoV-2, makipag-ugnayan sa DOH o sa inyong espesyalista.
Hello, my name is Micah and welcome to this week's Hyper Local. Let me show you around my town, Paete, Laguna.
Paete is a municipality south of Metro Manila. You need to ride about 2 buses, a jeepney, and a tricycle to get here. Commute may take 4 to 6 hours from the GSI office in BGC. If you're a Filipino, the first thing that would come to mind when you hear this place is wood carving. Paete has centuries of history of wood carving, which is evident until now. Even my father carves, but using fruit. A kilometers away from our town is Caliraya, a man-made lake made in the late 1930s. Its serene waters and peaceful surroundings is a popular place to go for those who wants to break away from the hustle in the city. Also nearby is the Pagsanghan Falls. In contrast from Caliraya's peacefulness, this place is the one who seeks adventure. White water rafting is a hit in this place during the rainy months. One of famous restaurant in the area is Aling Taleng, known all over the country for her halo-halo. The place is a hit stopover, especially during summer months. Halo-halo is a Filipino word that means mixture. Just by looking at it, I think you know what it's called that way. It is a famous dessert, especially during the hot summer months in the country. Sliced bananas, jackfruit, pearls, and flan are mixed together with thickened sugar syrup, and stuff underneath are packed of ice. The result is a sumptuous cold dessert that cools our tropical head in the middle of the scorching summer heat.
That's it for this week's Hyper Local. Join us next week as Rev tours us in his hometown, Los Baños, Laguna. Again, this is Micah and thank you for watching.
This edition of Thought Leaders is made possible by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media.
Welcome back. You're still watching Thought Leaders with Elisabet Wreme and Ian Moses. If you're watching from the Philippines, the request form is now active. Just go to bit.ly/GSI request 1. You will be asked for the name of today's guest, name of the show, and your social media account. Now let's take a look at some activity on social media real quick. I believe everybody will agree with me that it was quite an informative and very inspiring talk. Elisabet over there. Malin is agreeing. She's saying changing perspective and changing our very own biases is really the first step into changes that we are expecting from our society. So thank you, Malin, for contributing. Pamela is thanking Elisabet for that very inspiring words. Pia is also thanking and agreeing that indeed it was a very inspiring talk. Mary Joyce is also thanking Elisabet for those encouraging words. Carlos, who I believe is already a regular for all of our events, is agreeing. Empowerment begins within yourself. Be strong. Thank you, Elisabet. That's what he said. All right. We have a lot of people agreeing in our social media. Yulin is saying thank you to Elisabet, and Ruth is saying very informative session, and I think everybody agrees to that. We don't have that much questions on social media. I believe everybody is just agreeing that it was a very good talk, Ian and Elisabet. But maybe the only question I have in my end, and I believe everybody would be interested to know as well, is what specifically are the programs we do in Guild, from your perspective, Elisabet, that actually encourages women to be more participative in the workforce, and at the same time encourage men like me and Ian to be conscious of our own biases, and encourage women to step up.
Yeah, so a little bit more than a year ago, we launched Women in Guild. So if you go to JJ, there is a section called Women in Guild. And if you haven't already been there, if signed up, definitely do that. You can be a male or a female to be part of Women in Guild. So it's for anyone who is concerned about inclusion. We run, for instance, a monthly speaker series with people coming in on talking in different topics, and it has been everything from career advice was the last one, how you write a career plan, to we had Megumi in who talked about quietly powerful, because especially women are, linking back to Ian's questions, are often a little bit more quiet. So how can you be leader without having to change who you are? So how do you become powerful in your quietness, for instance? So it's very much about being your authentic self, and we're providing basically different types of speakers to help people find their niche, because as I think one of the pre-videos while we were waiting for this session to start was, everyone is different. So what works for one person doesn't always work for someone else. So we're trying to provide different tools and different perspectives for people to empower themselves. That's what Women in Guild is all about, and creating the community and sharing resources and discussion and informal mentoring. So, for instance, I mentor a couple of women within Guild in Australia, because we can look after each other, right? To more formally, when of course we look at things like when you do engagement surveys, when you do talent days, you look at women and female and like the different populations and so forth. So there's also more formal overlay, but I still believe that most power comes from creating a community and us changing the world together. It's very seldom change comes from institution. The change comes from the people. So that's why I love doing these type of, not that I love talking on these type of things, because it's not what I'm my preference, but I know it's going out there and talking to people, and the world changes from the grassroots up. That's I'm a strong believer in. If we all step one step forward, it's just an amazing amount of change we will see.
Elisabet, just one question from social media, which is very interesting, actually. How can we handle those who are not willing to listen? and at the same time, people who are not willing to step up, how do we lift them up? Maybe these are two questions coming from Jenny.
So to the second part of the question, who are not willing to empower themselves, I don't think you can empower someone else. You have to empower yourself. What we can do is to make sure that we don't disempower them. And let me explain how I see that being different. If you tie someone up and ask them, can you play tennis? Obviously, that person can't play tennis, right? Your job is to cut the rope, but that doesn't mean they're a great tennis player. They have to make themselves a great tennis player. So your job as manager is to make sure that you don't unconsciously do things to disempower them. As sometimes that can be systemic, like I talked about the breakfast meetings before. Sometimes it could be the way you treat or talk about them that makes them feel they're not worth anything, right? So that's the piece. But in the end, the person also had to step into it. For the people who are not willing to listen, again, if you work in an environment and there's too many of those people who don't want to listen, I always say try to find a better place to work. Life is too short to be in a place and being miserable. And if there's a couple of those people around, you can probably create enough momentum again by the community and getting together and creating a different standard, professional standard. A lot of things changes around you. I've always been able to, if you are in an environment and you're professional and you act with integrity, the world around you kind of grows into that because that becomes the expected norm. You can't achieve that if it's too big of a challenge to the system. But if there's a couple of people in there, I will just ignore them and get on with it and build the rest to become a great environment. And they will have to, over time, either change or move on themselves because they would like that environment. So don't focus on them. Focus on what you can do.
All right. Thank you, Elisabet. I think those are the only questions we have from social media. I'll hand this back over to you and yourself now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Look, once again, thanks very much, Elisabet, for your time today. I did, just before closing and wishing everyone a safe and happy weekend, I did say that we would come back to your engineering, and I just want to understand, for all the budding engineers or all the engineers online, can you give us a little bit of context about what engineering means to you in your past?
I can. I became an engineer probably. I'll tell the true story, not the. So, yeah, this is the completely truth, and this is how random the world is. I know this is a live broadcast, but I'm going to do that anyway. My whole life, I was going to become a vet. So I always studied science and all that because to become a vet, you need to do all of those bits and pieces. Growing up in Sweden, there was a funny thing going on that I wanted to, if you came into vet school, there was a risk that you couldn't actually select what type of vet you were going to become. You could actually have a lottery, end up become a forensic vet looking at dead pigs, which wasn't at all what I wanted. I wanted to become a horse vet. So it sounded too scary to me. So suddenly I stood there and think, what on earth do I do? And I had been up since I went through science and I did all the maths and physics and all of those bits and pieces to basically the engineering school because they were trying to recruit women. And I had such a good time up there for that weekend that I decided that sounds fun. I'll go and do that for a term and then I'll decide what I want to do instead of becoming a vet. So I kind of slipped in on a banana peel, and then I actually loved it because it's all about problem solving, seeing the system, seeing what you can do because I'm an industrial engineer. What if you change here, can you get that outcome over here? So an engineering degree is amazing, I think, because it allows you to solve problems and deal with whatever comes. So I didn't know that about engineering, but I'm so glad I did in the end. So that is a true story. Life is random.
Yeah, well, and they're the best stories, and it makes me proud. Another another proud engineer. I agree. Life is engineering. Everything's a problem.
Absolutely. So I would recommend that to anyone. Even if you don't know what you want to do, engineering just helps you deal with anything that comes your way.
Absolutely. And on that positive, very positive note, I'd like to wish you a very good weekend. Thanks again for your time. For all of our audience, thank you for listening in today. We look forward to seeing you on the next broadcast. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for having me.
This edition of Thought Leaders is made possible by Guild Solutions Inc. and Enabling Media. Catch this show next week as a podcast on Spotify. For more learning sessions, features, and opportunities, like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thought Leaders is a proud production of Enabling Media. For comments and suggestions, email us at makethingshappen@guildgroup.com.au.